Testing 1, 2.
Resilience is key to living life well. Think about it. If you want to achieve anything of meaning, requires that we push through the hard part. There's always going to be pain, challenges along the way. Resilience is what helps us get to where we want to go. Learn a skill, achieve a goal, we need resilience. Now, one of the things that supports resilience is motion. People who are moving are more likely to develop resilience than people who are stuck. So Einstein said, life is like riding a bicycle. To keep your balance, you must keep moving. That's quite wise words. And sometimes we might walk forward slowly, and that's okay. But always be walking forward, never backwards. Welcome to Mike 4, where we're talking about motion and resilience. In Mike 3, for those of you who watched it, you might remember that we spoke about 4 different postures that enable motion. We spoke about, for example, the observer, who is in a state of motion because he's invested and he's waiting. We also spoke about somebody who is the adventurer. The adventurer is prepared to fail in the right direction, and that too is motion. We had the third character, who is the disruptor, the person who disrupts comfort zones so that they can become better. And then lastly, we spoke about the disciplinarian. The disciplinarian is the person who makes this moment the best one ever, who is endlessly fascinated with doing the same things over and over again. These are 4 postures of motion. Today, what we're going to look at in Mike 4 is what energizes that, what activates that, what causes somebody to disrupt or to be prepared to fail or to just sit in a place of stillness waiting. We're going to do this by looking at 4 key statements. Now, these statements are very, very simple, but these statements have the ability to transform. And so let's get into them. Here is statement number 1. This is who I am. I find that I tend to have more motion when I'm remembering who I am and what's most important to me. A couple of years ago, there was this interesting experiment that was undertaken in a hospital. And basically what they found was that people come into the hospital to be healed, to receive medical treatment, but sometimes they leave with a secondary disease or they get a secondary disease. And many of the reasons for the secondary disease has got to do with hygiene. And it's quite simple in the end. Medical staff don't necessarily wash their hands. I know it sounds rather strange, especially seeing we've traveled the path of COVID. So they were desperate to try and get medical staff, doctors, nurses to wash their hands. So they made an experiment of this. And here's the experiment. They put posters in the washrooms, but there were 2 different posters. The first poster read as follows: hygiene, personal hygiene, prevents you from getting disease. All right, so do you get the first one? Personal hygiene prevents you from getting disease. The second poster that was put in some other washrooms went as follows: personal hygiene prevents your patients from getting disease. All right, I'm sure we've got both of those. The first one prevents me from getting disease. The second one prevents my patients from getting disease. Now, which one do you think would have the biggest impact? Now, it's quite interesting as I share this science experiment within workshops. More often than not, people say the first one. And I think it makes sense because are we not naturally prone to look after ourselves? But what was so fascinating about this experiment was that there was a 45% uptake of soap usage by the second poster. Now, why is that? Here's the logic. The second poster reminds medical staff, doctors, nurses, of what's appropriate for them based on what they do. They're there to heal people, not to make them worse. They're there to get people out of hospital, not to keep them in hospital. It connects them to, this is what's important to me. After all, I've taken an oath. It sort of reminds me of The Lion King, where Simba gets a bit of sense knocked into him by the baboon, Rafiki, and he goes down to the water and he hears the words of his father, Mufasa, who says to him, Simba, Simba, you've forgotten who you are. And Simba, upon reconnecting with who he is, finds motion to go back to his home. Simba's reconnected with what's appropriate for a lion like him. It's definitely not playing in Hakuna Matata land. Some of my habits are quite extreme, or certainly some people think that. I wake up really, really early and do some silly things, according to some people. But one of the things that gives motion towards those things is it answers a question for me. And the question is, what's appropriate for a person like me? Now, I'm not saying my habits are right and your habits are wrong, but the motion, the energy to do what I do is founded in, this is who I am. A great exercise to do is to finish this statement. People like me, now finish it off. What do people like you do? When we understand what people like you do, and we've got clarity around it, chances are we're going to find motion to dial into that, especially when the world becomes quite a challenging place. So that's our first statement. First statement is, this is me. So let's go to a second statement. The second statement would go like this. This is my hope, or this is my desire. Now, Napoleon Hill, many, many years ago, came up with this quote, and he said, desire is the beginning of all achievement. I know some people who don't necessarily like the word desire, but I agree with Napoleon Hill. If we don't have desire to do something, we're not going to do anything at all. I have a tendency to sometimes see tomorrow as the same as today. In other words, it's Groundhog Day, where every day is the same. If I see tomorrow, the future, as being the same as today, I'm probably going to lack motion, because why do anything? It's the same. Desire is this belief that I can achieve something, I can claim something, I can find something that's not here today. Will Smith might not be the most popular actor at the moment, but I still like Will, and I still love his book, by the way, Will. And he's got this brilliant thought process within the book where he says, hope is the elixir of our survival during our darkest times. It's quite a strong word and quite a strong thought. Hope. The ability to envision and imagine a brighter day gives meaning to our suffering and renders it bearable. When we lose hope, we lose our central source of strength and resilience. Desire, hope. When we become clear about what's possible into the future, and we create stories around it, and we see it, and we give ourselves permission to think about it, we enable motion. When we have no desire, when we see nothing, we disengage, we disable that motion. So this is my desire, this is my hope. There's this beautiful scene in the movie The Notebook where Noah, Ryan Gosling, looks at Ellie, Emma Stone, and he looks at her and he says to her, what do you want? She's confused. She doesn't know what tomorrow looks like. And he looks at her with desperation. What do you want? If we're going to activate motion, sometimes we need to be saying to ourselves, what is it that we want? This is my desire. This is my hope. So let's go to the third statement. This is how I serve. Now, sometimes people who have a little bit of a resistance to the word desire say so because it seems very, very selfish. This is how I serve takes us onto another word, possibly a more powerful word than desire, and this is the word purpose. Purpose is where I begin to see the world as bigger than me. I tend to become stuck when the world becomes all about me. This is how I serve. Dan Pink, one of my favorite authors, says, the most deeply motivated people, not to mention those who are most satisfied, hitch their desires to a cause that is larger than themselves. He's beginning to talk about this wonderful word called purpose. When I find purpose, when my life is about being a gift, serving other people, it's incredible the motivation that can come. And remember, that motivation leads me to a place of motion in the form of extreme adversity. There was this very, very interesting experiment that was done with college students who were about to graduate. And they were asked to set themselves a goal for the future, 2 years' time. What they noticed about the goals that were set is that some of them were very, very much what we would call achievement goals. These were guys who wanted to have a particular role, a particular title in 2 years' time, or possibly they wanted to be earning a particular salary in 2 years' time. And then there were some students who didn't set themselves an achievement goal, they set themselves a purpose goal. They were more interested in what they would be doing for somebody else in 2 years' time. For example, I want to be able to buy my mother a car, or I want to be able to give so much money away to this particular cause. What they did with these guys is they then hooked up with them about a year later, and they began to see how they were doing in the achievement of that objective or goal, and also how happy they were. Was the workplace that they were now in more overwhelming than university, or was it the other way around? And what became quite clear as they looked into these students, or these students who are now in the workplace, was those who had set themselves a purpose goal tended to be in a more happier, less anxious space than those who had purely focused on the achievement goal. Now remember, achievement is a wonderful thing. We need to set achievement goals. But what becomes possible when we are asking ourselves, this is how I serve, which leads us probably more towards the purpose goal. Malcolm Gladwell says something quite powerful. He says, work is only a prison sentence if it has no meaning. How good is that? This is how I serve begins to create a narrative like this. This is a gift I bring. And a starting point to move a little bit into the purpose place is just to begin to start seeing yourself as a gift. You walk into a meeting room and you say, what gift am I bringing to this meeting? Remember, it might be a boring, horrible meeting, one you don't want to go to. But the moment you begin to start focusing on the gift that you bring, you're probably going to transform your experience of that meeting. And guess what? You're going to have motion. Now you might sit as the observer from mic 3, or you might sit as the disruptor from mic 3, trying to make this meeting really, really count. I once heard this beautiful story about a toll booth operator who loves being a toll booth operator. Imagine that. When I think of toll booth operators, I think of them being in this little cubicle, 12 o'clock at night, a whole lot of unhappy passengers coming by. But this lady responded and she said, I love being a toll booth operator because I give away 500 smiles a day. She's put purpose, meaning into what she does. This is no longer a prison sentence. And finally, let's move to statement number 4. This is an interesting one. It goes as follows. Here is my urgent anger. Let me say that again. Here is my urgent anger. Now there's two big words there. Urgent, anger. I don't know about you, but when the word anger comes up, I tend to see it as a negative, something that we should be cutting out. Urgency can sound a little bit frantic, but here is my urgent anger. Urgent anger creates motion probably like nothing else. Let's talk about urgency. An interesting study was done on sustainability projects, 300 of them. And they looked at the failed sustainability projects versus those that succeeded. When they looked at them, they found that the primary difference between the failed and the successful didn't have to do with communication. It didn't have to do with emotions, with a metaphor of what they were trying to do. The fundamental difference between those that succeeded and those that failed had to do with the level of urgency that was created. Greta Thunberg, gotta love her. She says this. She says, I don't want your hope. I don't want you to be hopeful. I want you to act as if the house is on fire. What is Greta trying to do there? She's trying to create a level of urgency for the time in which we're living in. Come on, guys, we've got to do something here. Without that urgency, we're not going to change. In actual fact, a guy called John Cotter says this. He says, without a sense of urgency, people won't make the necessary sacrifices they need to do. Instead, they'll cling to the status quo and resist. There's something about urgency which gets us to move. But how do we create that urgency? We'll get there now. Let's talk about anger. Anger is something that we probably try and avoid. We're telling people to stop being angry. But every single invention that we've got came about, probably most of them at least, because somebody got angry with the current status quo. I love this from Liz Gilbert. She says, I've never seen any life transformation that didn't begin with the person in question finally getting sick of their own BS. Let me say that again. It's really good. I've never seen any life transformation that didn't begin with the person in question finally getting sick of their own BS, their own excuses. I know that's true for my own life. I've got to get angry with the mediocrity. I've got to get angry with what I should be doing. And then the anger is not only towards myself to get motivation, but say towards what we should be doing in the world. So Tom Peters, a great business guru, says this. He says, instead of courage, we might need to foster a level of fury with the status quo so that people can not only but act. Sometimes we need to be showing people that where we are right now and where we should be is something that we should be getting urgently angry about. But just a couple of strategies around anger. We realize that anger can be dangerous. It's such a powerful emotion, especially if it's mixed with a sense of urgency. But one of the best ways to make sure that our anger is well grounded and well focused is get angry for, not against. I don't know if that makes sense. When I'm angry against a person, I want to make sure that they suffer for the wrong that they're doing. But when I'm angry for others who are being impacted by a situation, it's probably going to lead me to serve. Our statement number 3. So I can get angry with somebody who's doing something wrong, or I can get angry for the people who are the victims of what it is that they're doing. And hence maybe I begin to do something. I can get angry with myself for not changing or not doing something that I should. But I might want to link that to what are we losing because I'm not showing up in the way that I should? What's the world losing because I'm mediocre? I know these are quite strong words. The second thought about anger is begin to link and make the gap as big as possible from present to what could be. Barack Obama's got this beautiful quote, and it goes something like this. He says, we've got a choice. We can either settle for the world as it is, or we can work for the world as it should be. Think about that for a moment. But for me to work for the world as it should be is going to probably require this element of urgent anger. I become less motional. No, that's the wrong word. I lose motion when my life is too passive, when my life is too tranquil. Now, I love tranquility. Look around where we are here, I love tranquility. But if it's too tranquil, if it's too passive, I might lose motion. I might need a little bit of urgent anger. So those are the 4 statements. Let me see if I can quickly remember them, and each of them have the ability to activate. This is who I am. This is my desire or my hope. 3, this is how I serve. 4, this is my urgent anger. Now, each of those statements needs systems in place, habits that begin to drive it. But if I have clarity around those 4 and I begin to keep diving into it, I will find incredible energy to be those different roles that we spoke about in Mike 3. So let's close this off by just using an analogy of a car. A vehicle is motion. And I remember years ago, in actual fact, I can tell you the exact year, 2006, I left the corporate world, taken this big risk because I knew who it is that I am. And I decided that I was going to learn to speak Zulu. So I went to Natal University, Howard campus in Durban. And I started to learn the language with a bunch of students. And I soon knew that I was in trouble about 2-3 months later because I couldn't keep up with these guys. And it became quite overwhelming. And unfortunately, I, after about 3-4 months, said, I don't think I can keep up the speed. The vehicle I'd chosen was wrong. But I'll never forget one day leaving the campus at about 8 o'clock at night. The lessons were from 6 to 8 in the evening. And as I passed Spaghetti Junction, for those of you who don't know Durban, Spaghetti Junction is this big highway interjunction. And as I passed it, I suddenly hit this incredible traffic jam. And the worst part is I had just passed the Spaghetti Junction, so I couldn't get off. So I immediately quickly switched the radio on to East Coast Radio, the local radio station. And as I switched it on, the DJ says, "Stay off the N3." And they begin to start saying, there's this big oil spillage by Paradise Valley. And by the way, if you're in it for a long time. And I'll never forget, just parking there. But every now and again, there's a little bit of movement. And when you're desperate, you begin to compare yourself to the travelers next to you. And my comparison was with a blue Toyota next to me. Am I further than him? Am I in the right lane, in other words? Because sometimes the one lane moves and then the other, and the others don't. And I'm sure we've all experienced that frustration of people trying to weave in and out of different lanes. But how crazy is this? I'm comparing myself to another desperate traveler who's going nowhere. Motion is not about a comparison to the person next to you. Motion is about your own potential and ability that is within you. Its point is comparing myself to that person. But let's just stay with the car analogy because this really works for me and go back to our 4 statements. When I'm in a car, I often need to consider, who am I? This is who I am. This is what's appropriate for me. And I don't know about you, but the car is the place where we're often tested about what's most important to us and our values. Ever behaved badly in the traffic? I'm sure you have. I know I have. But life is like the roads and getting into a car. Sometimes the roads work, sometimes they don't. Sometimes we have good days, sometimes it's horrible days. It's like being in that car. But remember, if I know how I want to choose to be on the roads, I'm probably going to be more resilient on those roads. And I can stay away from being that person that I don't. Whenever I live into who I want to be, I find motion. Secondly, let's just look at our second statement. And our second statement is about desire. This is my desire. When I get into a car, I'm going somewhere. There's a destination. If I'm in a traffic jam and at least there's a destination, well, the traffic jam is sort of worth it because I'm going somewhere. But imagine being in a traffic jam and you don't even know where you're going. That's not fun. This is my desire. This is my hope. Gives my journey in a car meaning. It gives it direction. I know for myself, I need to become more clear on that alternate future where I'm going. Thirdly, this is my gift. Very, very seldom do we ride a road and we're the only person. Our world is made up of many, many travelers. I can either choose to ignore them, or I can either be mean and cut them off and impact their drive, or I can recognize that we are inextricably connected to those who are around us. And I can hopefully live with a sense of purpose that makes it possible for them to get to their destination as well. And then sometimes on the roads, I need an urgent anger where the anger is directed in the right way. There's far too much road rage, which is just people losing it all. But sometimes I might need to get angry because the state of the roads is impacting not just me, it's impacting all of us. That might be something worth getting angry about and with a sense of urgency, but not do it in the right way. Do it for people, not against others. I might get angry about those people who have got no regard for others on the road, but simply shouting, screaming at them isn't going to help. Get angry for people rather than against. But we know we're only going to change this road experience with a sense of urgency and a sense of the right anger to make a difference. So those are 4 statements that enable the 4 roles. Remember our simple premise: if we've got motion, we're probably going to have high levels of resilience. How much motion do you have right now?